All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Fun with Cars, third edition of the weekly live stream on Saturday night. Do have some new features here I'd like to add. I am having a little bit of technical difficulty. I did try to set the stream up so I could broadcast both horizontal and vertical. It should be in the vertical format only, and I don't know if that transpired or transposed onto YouTube because of the way that YouTube's layout is and the software, the StreamYard software that I'm using. I'm not sure that both of them will work in tandem, so it may not even show that there's one of the live streams may not even show up. So I apologize for that. I do want to update everyone on the progress we made on the Oldsmobile. The Oldsmobile that we had the engine out of came from a 1937 Oldsmobile, has not run since 1969. Did make some progress with that engine this week. I got the top of it back together. We have compression on all 6 cylinders. Started dressing the engine with the brackets and all the attributes that need to make it run. The carburetor is already gone through, disassembled, cleaned, and put back together. We have the ignition wires all hooked up. We took the spark plugs, we cleaned them, gapped them, anti-seized them, put them back into the cylinder head, torqued the spark plugs to spec. So I think that the ignition system, the fuel system is all set to go. So you need fuel, spark, and compression. I believe we have it. I'm waiting on an engine stand. It's a cradle type engine stand that we can put that engine in on the ground and then add fuel, add power from a battery, add an ignition coil, and we should hopefully make some noise. That's the hope. If that engine runs, we would like to get that put into my buddy's uncle's 1936 Oldsmobile that has been sitting around since 1962 waiting for an engine, and that would be awesome. Today was a pretty exciting day. I met up with Flora, who owns the Triumph TR6. If you haven't seen that video, after this, I do suggest you check it out because that was a pretty amazing story too. Her dad had sadly passed about 4 years ago, and the car sat and didn't run. Kind of became a little bit at disarray. So I ended up purchasing the car from the estate. I got the car running, about a month's worth of work. And when I was all done, as I told her, I would offer it back to her for sale if she wanted it before I, moved it on, but did not want to see that go to become a parts car or get sold, to the salvage yard, God forbid. So did get it running, got it polished up. It ran and drove great. It's convertible, so the top down, even my wife really fell in love with that car. It was really cool. It still is really cool. At any rate, Flora did say, hey, I would like to buy the car back. And I said, perfect. So she took the car back. She's just getting ready for it to go in the store. She has it on the road, and the clutch stopped working. Clutch stopped working because the slave cylinder, which I had put in, her dad had purchased a slave cylinder, which was in the glove box, but that's where the mice were, and took that brand new old part, brand new old stock, I should say, and installed that, bled the clutch cylinder, and unfortunately was not able to get, or was able to get a clutch pedal, but was not able for that cylinder to last, and it leaked out. She bought a brand new one, and we got that up and running. So she did that work today, actually. Let me show you this. I want to say welcome again. Hi, Jennifer, Dale, Diddy, Muhammad, Mexican Spec. I appreciate you. And I'm going to do some things with chat to show. So this is one of the things that I can do with the new format, the new software I'm using from StreamYard. Should be able to double click this and you can see that on the screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Type in the comments section if you can see that. That's one of the features of the software that I do like. So Diddy, where are you coming in from? I got Jennifer's, I got Mexican Specs, and I got Dale's map interactive. So I have this feature, which I'd like to do for every live stream. This is kind of a take on what Dale and Jennifer and I, and even Lillian when she's here, she's on vacation, that we have been witness to. Kind of. It's a little bit different. The live stream that we watch almost every week, they had a map where they would put a pin where everyone was coming from. And I like that. I thought that was kind of inclusive, and you kind of get to see across the world how many people are watching. Last week, we had an amazing turnout. We had 7,700 people tune into this live stream during the hour that I was up. And I was really honored. That was amazing. And there was people from England and Germany and New Zealand, Kenya. So I'd like to see that. Hi, Michelle. So the feature that I'd like to try with you today, I want to present a short video that I listed today from Flora with her Triumph after she put in the slave cylinder for the clutch, and it turned out pretty amazing. So this is the first time that I'm trying this. I am not exactly sure if it will work as well as I thought it might. Check this out. You're probably going to see way more than I really want it to show, but we're going to try it just this one time. So you can see my live stream. You can see everything that I posted. You're basically, hopefully you can see the screen that I'm clicking on. This feature is new to me. I'm still learning it. I do have my crazy thumbnails. This is the one that I want you to see. This is
okay. We're out visiting Flora with her TR6. We got a little emergency repair so she can get it into storage. Check it out. Normally I'm wrenching on these things, but Flora is doing the job just fine. We're changing that cylinder we put in a few months back because it leaked out sitting in the driveway. So she's got a new one, and she's taking the old one out as we speak. Flora's got the old new cylinder out and the new cylinder ready to go in. How'd we do?
Pretty good.
All right. Those are the hands of a real tech. That's awesome. I didn't get it. I didn't get you starting it, but it's all done, ready to go. How do you feel?
Very good.
All right, sweet. Flora's first major repair. Okay, we're out visiting Flora with her TR6.
Right, so one thing that happens is it goes on repeat. I got to take that off and stop sharing the screen and then come back to this. Hopefully that transition worked pretty good. The interactive map that I wanted to show you, which I think is pretty neat. This is, again, sharing the screen. This is what it looks like when I put in everyone's general vicinity. So if you type in chat where you're from, I'll put a pin on the map, and at the end of the stream, it'll be fun to see how much of the map we can color in. Comment down below if you think that's a good idea, or if you don't think it's a good idea. I think that is, I don't know, pretty neat. So I'll stop sharing the screen. I know if it was horizontal, I'd be able to see it better. The goal is, with this software, you can stream over multiple platforms. I'm hoping that you can see it in vertical form and horizontal form. The vertical form that I'm using, I know I don't care for watching streams in vertical form, but that's what YouTube is promoting. So I'm trying to keep up with what YouTube is promoting, because I think that helps the channel and helps the channel build. Dale likes the map idea. Jennifer's watching from her phone. There's one thing that I wanted to do with Jennifer, that I was not able to do in the normal settings in the software that I have. So this StreamYard software is still new to me, and I'm sorry for the long pauses. I'm trying to cut out the ums and the ands and the filler words, because when I watched myself from Tuesday while practicing with the software, it was pretty difficult for me to watch, and I just thought that it would be better if I thought through my sentences before I say them, so you get less of that. And in the stream, so I can watch in the stream, hopefully, and see your comments. But because I'm doing it through a secondary software, there are a few things that I'm not able to do as an administrator for the channel that I would like to do. As Mexican Specs said, would like to turn him blue, but I can't turn. So, for example, I wanted Jennifer Russell to also be a mod in the channel, but I was not able to turn that on as of yet, Jennifer. That is a technical issue on my end, so I apologize. Say, Jay Brown. Yeah. Oh, I'm a little too far. I put you a little too far down the map. Mexican Spec, I put you on the map based on the license plate in the beginning of your stream. And when I Googled that state in Mexico, Jericho, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, Jericho, that is where on the map that it kind of, the general vicinity it was. So, Mariano, thanks for joining chat. If you're new to the stream and you just joined chat, please join the live stream chat and type in country or town or city or state that you're at right now. I'd love to put you on the interactive map that I just showed. There are a few things. Okay, so I want to show Mexican Specs reply. So Mex posted he's not in Jalisco. He's in. I'm not even going to dare to try to pronunciate that. I don't think that I'm going to say it right. Sonola. Okay, so you like the Jalisco plate, but you're in a different part of Mexico, and I apologize. I will change you. So I put you too far down, so too far south. I will put you a little bit more to the north. So, okay. So I didn't even, hey, I'm not that good with the map of Mexico. We don't study that here in the United States. I apologize. It's like languages, if you speak 2 languages, you're bilingual, which I'm sure Mexican Spec is at least bilingual, but if he speaks 3 languages, he's trilingual. And you know what it's called when you speak 1 language? American. That's what you are. Anyways, it's a joke. Don't get offended. We like to have fun. Let's nobody get offended. We're just having some fun. At any rate, there are a few things that I did want to go over in this live stream. That I went over the updates with the Oldsmobile engine. So I ordered from Temu, which I do not recommend buying anything from them. I got roped in again. I don't know why, but for $40 they had an engine cradle stand. So basically it's an engine stand that has 4 brackets on it where you can mount the engine in. It's low to the ground. So The weight of that Oldsmobile engine is very, very nose heavy, and I have 4 large bolts where it bolts to the transmission bell housing, holding it on the stand. But because of the length of the inline 6 and the heavy castings of that time period especially, that's a lot of pressure on those bolts, and I am worried about that. But I do want to say hello to a special guest that just said hello in chat. So I will use the pin for Lillian in Mexico on our interactive chat, and hopefully Lillian can see this. So Lillian, this is for your benefit too. We were discussing between Lily and I some of the features of this software. She has her YouTube channel both in English and Russian. She teaches English to Russian speakers, and she teaches Russian to English speakers for many, many years. I would say an expert linguist, and it has a very nice YouTube channels, plural. I don't know if she got to see this, but when I share the screen and I share the interactive map, so this is from Maptive. I can share this. This is where Lillian is on vacation. I don't know, can you see my cursor? Please comment down below. I don't know what you can and can't see, but I can place another marker on the map. Max, it wanted me to sign in again, so I'm signing in. Apologize for that. Hopefully this lets me sign back in and see what it does. Now I should be able to place a marker for Mexican spec. I'm making a best guesstimate here for Mexican spec. I will get that straight once I look up the town that you gave me on Google Maps, so I can get educated better about the country of Mexico, which I have never been to. Someday I want to visit. Mex is going to give me all the ins and outs, the must-sees of Mexico. And Lillian is enjoying some beautiful beach in Mexico. In fact, I think that my brother and sister-in-law, my sister-in-law was in chat earlier, I think that's where their honeymoon was. So let me get back to where I was. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. All right, we got the comments. Michelle, if you're still in chat, my sister-in-law Michelle, please type in where your honeymoon was, where you guys went for your honeymoon. Yeah, Lillian's in a tourist place, no doubt. Mexican spec avoids the tourist traps, but I don't know if you, Mex, would you say, and maybe my impression is incorrect, but it was my understanding that you're best in a tourist place where they speak English than being a non-Spanish speaker in, let's say, rural Mexico, that you would have a tough time? Or do you think that most Mexicans or most areas of Mexico have English speakers enough that you could get by with that? I avoid Niagara Falls, although I was at Niagara Falls this afternoon. So after I left Flores, I came back home, got all my tools back in the toolbox, took a shower, and then went out to Niagara Falls because one of the guys I used to work with at one of the dealership, one of the techs, I met him out for lunch, and he lives in Niagara Falls. So I met him out there, and we had lunch together. But there was a lot of traffic. It was a beautiful day today, and a lot of people were heading out to Niagara Falls. So there was a lot of traffic heading towards Niagara Falls. And I was in the city of Niagara Falls, not by the falls themselves, but I didn't go to the falls right where the water goes over. I was in the city of Niagara Falls towards the outskirts, and that's where we met for lunch. Okay, so Mex says most areas do not have English speakers, so you got to learn. You have to learn Spanish if you're going to travel in Mexico, in the, let's say, the rural areas, to get around comfortably. And it is best to go to a tourist place. So we hope not to get scammed by anyone, right? Puerto Vallarta, I believe, is where my brother and sister-in-law had their honeymoon back in the 80s. So, but I think my sister-in-law left chat because she didn't say hello. But she said hello earlier, and I didn't put it up. We kind of got past that. I did have some things that we discussed on Tuesday when I was testing the software. So some of the things that I was showing was the pictures from the different projects that we worked on this channel through this year. For example, my buddy Mark bought a 1973 MG that hadn't run in years, helped him get that running. This is a picture of that car as he put it up on the trailer. It obviously, by the amount of dust on it, it's been years. We figured about 20 years. I think the New York State inspection sticker on it, last one valid, was 2001, if I'm remembering correctly. So this is Dale Schisler in chat. This is his dad's 1964 Chevelle. His dad's 91 years old, and he's got this beautiful car. They've done some very tasteful upgrades to it that I think is a smart way of upgrading a vehicle from stock. They modified the upgraded parts, which the parts that they chose, for most people, you would modify the stock parts for those to fit. He did the reverse. He took the parts that he wanted and had those modified to work with the stock components. So they were essentially bolt-on, and then they could unbolt them if somebody wanted to return it to factory original. I don't know why you would necessarily want to do that. Most cars like this, that are this clean, when you make modifications and you don't modify the base of the vehicle and you can return it to stock and you keep all the original parts, it adds even more value to the car because you have the best of both worlds. You have, okay, if we're turning it into a museum piece and you want it to present as it did from the factory, you can put all the original parts back on. And if it was on the concourse of a high-end car show, they would go over there and look for the chalk marks from when they, made marks at the factory when it was done. And they could look at all the original equipment and everything is stock. But if you drive it and use it, there's some features, especially with the brakes. And I think that's where the biggest upgrade was. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dale. I thought you and your dad modified the braking system to accept disc brakes. So maybe it came with drum brakes in the front and they modified it to have disc brakes, which on law of averages stop better, are better at dissipating heat, and overall performance. If you have to stop fast, typically you want disc brakes. Well, I had a 64 Cadillac that if I spiked the brakes with four-wheel drum, that thing would lock up all four wheels. That thing stopped. It weighed a very large amount. I want to say it was like 7,000 pounds. At least it seemed like when I put it on the lift was screaming, begging for mercy. That's how much that thing weighed. There was more steel in one front fender of that car than probably most cars nowadays. It just was pretty amazing. So that's the engine from Dale's dad's 64 Chevelle. Did want to share that with you. Dale, I did get your other email that had some information on it, but I couldn't extract anything that I felt I could, use with the stream tonight, so I apologize. But I did get your other email. I did want to comment on that. This is a museum in Pennsylvania Dale was telling me about. Dale, comment in chat where this is located in Pennsylvania and the name of it, because that detail escaped me for some reason. So I'd love to know, or maybe even go see this someday, because I don't think Dale and I are about 3 hours away from each other, and that's a nice day trip. So something I would definitely put in the bucket list to do. This is my buddy Mike's 1980 Datsun 280ZX. He just got this on the road after it had not run and sat in his garage for 26 years. He bought this originally in 1980. And in 1980, he got the 280ZX. He drove it for, I'd say, a decade. I don't remember the exact year that he sold it to his cousin. He was done driving it, and he sold it to his cousin. His cousin drove it for a few years and then sold it back to him. He parked it in the garage. Then life happened. He got married. They had a son, and they built a house, and all that happened all at once, and not all at once, but over time. And the car sat in his garage from 26 years ago until this year. And I reached out to him because I was looking for cool cars like that. I remembered it sitting in his garage, and I asked him what he was doing with it, and it was going to get it running. And he's like, it's funny you called me and said that. My wife said, you got to get that car running and get it going again. And he had reached out to somebody, but they never got back to them. So I'm like, well, I'd be happy to help you get it running. And we spent a few days with the car, but it actually runs really, really good. I was really impressed at how well it ran after sitting for so long. That could be a testament to Datsun, Nissan's quality back then. I know Nissan is a little bit more on rocky terms right now, as with all car manufacturers across the globe, it seems. But that was a year that car was produced in 1980 with fuel injection and what appeared to be Bosch fuel injection, the same type of fuel injection that my 1978 Jaguar that I saved had. So a lot of car manufacturers, and this is just in general terms for maybe somebody not as mechanically, understanding of the mechanical aspects of some vehicles, a lot of manufacturers, they put up bids for different components. Could be electrical system, could be the computer system for controlling everything, could be the charging system, starting system. The manufacturers sometimes bid that to different suppliers. So you might have 3 or 4 different manufacturers of vehicles that are across the globe. You might not think use the same components, but they actually do. So, and one of those components, and we had talked about this, and this is one of the subjects I was going to bring up and talk about today, was the Delco. So Delco Remy produces generators that they've used from the early 1900s all the way up through. Somebody had said in chat on one of my videos, commented that they still use those Delco Remy style generators. I thought he or she said with golf carts, which wouldn't surprise me because it's a very simple machine. It looks fairly straightforward to produce. I am by no means a production expert, but I went through the generator from the 1937 Oldsmobile, and it took me right back to when I worked at the machine shop where I rebuilt alternators, starters, and cylinder heads. And it's straight, I was still in high school, straight out of the program that I took at the local vocational school that's attached to the high school. My senior year, instead of taking 5 study halls, because I had all my work done except for 2 classes that I needed. I used my extra time instead of wasting it in study halls, or I took machine and tool, and I got a certificate in machine and tool, which I did get placed in a job after high school, but the conditions were so bad that it made me sign up for college. So for whatever that's worth. That's how that worked out. If Lillian is still in chat, now Lillian and I talked on the phone the other day. I should have asked you before I say anything. So some of the comments I want to show. So Dale, he appreciates the Z cars. I never did. My next door neighbors growing up, it was an early 70s Z car, and at the time I was into like muscle cars and American cars, and I didn't appreciate it much then, but it would be cool if he still had that car. I don't know. They moved out of state. My parents still talk to them, but I don't know if he still has that car. That was kind of neat. That's the tail end of Mike's car. This is my 59 AMC Rambler American that I bought. This is the condition I bought it in. It doesn't run, obviously. It hasn't run since at least the early 80s. It could be as far back as the late 70s. The battery that was in it was stamped 1978 through 81. Never was punched out. Lillian is still here. Awesome. I forgot my train of thought, Lillian, what I was going to point out. But, I know what it was. When you came to Buffalo, and hopefully I can talk about that. Can I? We were comparing notes. Lillian has been to Buffalo before, many, many years ago, about 30 years ago, at the same time that I worked at, or just about worked at, the Buffalo International Airport when I was in college. And it was, we were just comparing notes. It's kind of crazy how, our paths sometimes cross. Jennifer also sent me a brochure from Niagara Falls, New York, when she went as a kid, so a lot of times, and especially as big as the world is, a lot of times our circles cross paths and we don't even know it. And now fast forward to 2024, we've been and experienced some of the same things around the same time period, and we could have passed each other and never even knew it. I just find that fascinating. I find it kind of neat. So I'm following up with chat. Dale and Mex are talking about a car, but I lost out. Oh, Eagles. Okay, so they're talking about AMCs. So this AMC Rambler American, and this is not really, I don't think this is directly related to this Rambler, but in Mexico, Mexican Spec had this amazing vehicle. We're going to go back to Datsun Nissan for just a second. He has a car listed, or truck listed for sale right now. I believe it's still for sale. He just posted it like a day or two ago. It's a Datsun 720 pickup truck. Hope I got I've never seen one ever in my life. It's super clean. It's a 4-door, basically a crew cab. He called it a 4-door crew cab and kind of snickered at the redundancy in his video. So I don't know if that was posted that way to clarify to some, because I don't know in certain parts or certain verbiage if a crew cab could be like an extended cab with the fold out backwards doors. I'm not sure about that. Mex, please update us in chat about that. But that was amazing truck. I've never seen a four-door Nissan pickup truck in the mid-'80s. I believe that was the year. I thought it was 86. Correct me with that next. But that thing was just super cool. You have to check out Mexican Specs channel. All the cars that he posts, they're just simply amazing. I am so in awe because the climate where he's at versus the climate here is night and day. I wouldn't say, and maybe I'm wrong, Max, would you say that the climate is much more closer to Arizona? Although it doesn't seem to be directly linked because it's not desert-like, but Arizona, that's where the airplane graveyard is and stuff because of the low humidity. Vehicles, cars, whatever are preserved. Oh, so Max said, I'm going to post this here because so Mexican Spec said that it's a 1985 Datsun 720 crew cab, extra cab. So that truck, it reminds me of the I'm saying Datsun and Nissan is one word. Nissan and Datsuns of that era, that pickup truck, but almost with a modern flavor because it's a four-door crew cab in the United States. I don't think they've ever imported those. At least I don't ever remember them seeing them as a kid or even now. I've never seen Nissan Datsun with four doors. So, and Max, what year did they change the Datsun name to Nissan in Mexico? Or did they ever change it? That's a good question. Mexico has all the climates, Max said. Okay, so, and the crew cab is normally a real four-door, and that's what that truck was. That was pretty amazing. Do want to go through a few more pictures that this is kind of a update for anyone new joining chat or watching the stream, but this is something that we kind of went over Tuesday, and I was practicing for this stream, so it may be a little redundant to my friends that have been here on both Tuesday and today, but I do want to give everyone else a chance to look at the things that we went over. That's Flora and her dad. So Flora, she owns the Triumph TR6. This is when she was a kid, and that was her dad who passed. That's Flora when she got reunited with the car after we got it running and polished up, and she got to drive it for the first time in a local park. So she had never driven the car before in all her life, although it was around her pretty much all her life. As a teenager, she got to go to special events at school, like prom and homecoming, that kind of thing, in the car. That was the first time she actually got to see it in that condition and drive it herself, which was cool to see. That's in the video. That's a reflection of the clouds in the hood after my son polished it up. And it really, it was night and day compared to the pictures of when we first got it. I put this in here because one of the people that subscribe to the channel comment on a lot of videos from Southern California. And I did put some pictures in from Southern California when I went there. I went there twice to visit on work. One was with the Isuzu, and one was with Jaguar Land Rover. This is the time I went with Jaguar Land Rover, stayed in Irvine, California, right next to a Lamborghini dealership. It was the next town over. I Ubered over there. I wanted to see him firsthand. Ironically, I had a customer locally who bought two cars from here, a McLaren and a Lamborghini. and I inspected both of those when he was ready to put them on the road. And my niece works for him now, which is kind of funny. Small world, and this makes it smaller. Some of the equipment that I've been trying to make the channel better with and give a more professional look, like the camera I bought, although this is from Temu, and I am not exactly excited about the picture quality is great. The audio quality is absolutely horrible, and I think it's in the processor of the camera. I tried like different wireless microphones, different settings with the audio, and it's just garbage. So this car, my buddy Randy and I drove past Cleveland, Ohio, to a town called Berlin Heights, Ohio, and we dug this out of a field. It'd been abandoned basically and almost given up for parts. It's a Volvo PV544. Unique features about this car, or the PV544. If you look at it, it kind of looks like a 1953 Chevy and a 1960 Volkswagen Beetle had a love child. It's essentially what the PV stood for. It's like the Peoplewagen, but I can't say it in Swedish, but that's essentially what it was meant to be. It was meant to compete with the Volkswagen Beetle. It was the first vehicle to offer from the factory the Volvo patented 3-point seatbelt, which pretty much every modern car today has. Volvo developed the 3-point seatbelt. Before that was just a lap belt, but because of back injuries and a lot of other safety concerns, Volvo developed the 3-point harness. So in a collision, your upper torso is secured. Although the rudimentary means by which they secured it, they offered that patent to any manufacturer that wanted to use it free of charge. They did that as a gift to the world of automotive safety. I find that kind of interesting. And that car had the original seatbelts in it. I do have a short on how those seatbelts worked. They kind of remind me of like a strap for luggage, where you adjust them to you. They don't have a retractor. There's not an automatic lock. You adjust them to one length, and there's a metal rod on the floor that you connect the latch to from the seatbelt. And when you're done with it, it doesn't retract. You hang it back up on a hook behind your head. It's kind of cool. That had that seatbelt still in it. We dug that out of the field in Ohio, dragged it back to Buffalo, and I spent some time freeing up the engine that was seized, got it running again, and it was kind of cool. It drove well, I thought, for as old as it was. That car had one of the factory hubcaps left in it or on it. I don't remember which. So I had one hubcap for 4 Steelies. I got hubcaps off of eBay that I thought were right, but they weren't right. So when I sold it, didn't have any hubcaps. The one hubcap that I had laying around the garage, I bought a clock from Walmart, took the guts out of it, and I made a wall clock. I gave it to my buddy Randy, who went with me out to Cleveland with his brand new pickup truck at the time, off-roading with my other buddy's trailer, and we dragged the car back. And I gave Randy that for his birthday because I thought, what else could you do with a old hubcap from a Volvo? That's what I came up with. This is a flame paint job that Mexican spec does not like flames. I know. Don't. We'll just leave it as is. My buddy Chuck, that I've known for 30 some years, he used to help pit crew his drag car, his front engine dragster. He needed somebody to lay out flames, and he posted that on Facebook. I'm like, hey, if you got nobody, I've laid out flames before. I put that out there. He said, yeah, if you want to do it. So he dropped the tanks off. I masked out all the flames. I did not paint it. He put the paint on. He had it pinstriped. He cleared it. He sent me the final pictures of that, and it really, I thought it was really pretty amazing what he did with it. So I'm back on the live screen. I'm loving the AI produced art. I have a bunch of bikini models that I've been using for my videos for promoting them. I'm sure that it's cringe to some, but I'm sorry. I'm 12 years old. I'm old school when it comes to marketing, and my AI girls have been trying to promote some of my videos. Although, Lillian, this is for you. If you're still on, I did not get a chance. I'm going to absolutely use your suggestion. I actually spoke to Flora about that today. I said I was a little disappointed in the number of views that I got for her car, because the Triumph story is pretty amazing. I thought my editing might not be the greatest, but I thought it was presented pretty well as a story from beginning to end. Story being that her dad passed. She pretty much left the car up for dead because they had to close the estate. And after I got done fixing the car back up, so imagine if your loved one passed and this vehicle that reminds you of them is the last piece to, close and put that memory in the past. It was the last piece of the estate. And you're forced with either junking it or have somebody fix it, or, at least put it to good use. Well, that's what we ran into. That's what was done. I got it running again. We got it polished up, driving. And in the end, she got her dad's car back, and it belongs with her and her family. The one thing that I did tell her, and that's why we worked on it together today, and she wanted to do the work herself. I said, I don't want this car to be a burden to you. I want you to be able to enjoy it and not to be afraid of breaking anything on it. I want you to be able to, whatever it is, don't fear like you're going to, if something's broken, don't be afraid to break it even further. It can be put back together, but essentially, like a doctor, do no harm. So she got it fixed today. It was actually, if you watch that short, I think you could tell in the last scene, I think she was genuinely excited for a number of reasons. The stress from having to get the car out of her driveway and into storage, that should be solved, and that she was able to compensate herself. It was cool. I enjoyed that. Yes, I agree, Max. I know. So that's one thing that I never asked you. How much, most of the vehicles that you come across and do, you don't have to work on because they are just absolute stunning examples of the specimen that you sell. But do you have any classic vehicles of your own? I don't think we've ever discussed the cars that you have and what you have worked on in the past. I know you got a lot of experience working on cars. You're actually a few years old, probably about 10 years older than me. But Dale said, yeah, the older cars are much simpler to work on. I agree with that. If you look at some of the things that you have to do to the Volvos are the example that I can give, because the ironic part is I have 11 years with Volvo trucks. Volvo trucks and Volvo cars split probably in the 90s, I think, into two different corporations running them. So I had 11 years at Volvo truck dealership, Volvo and Mack. Volvo owns Mac. And after that, I have 4 years at Volvo Cars. That's where I got into the Volvos that I post on my channel. All right, that comment I have to put up on the board here. When Mexican Spec lived in Vegas, he had 100 cars, over 100 cars in his collection. Oh, $5 each. I did post a part of a short where somebody had a 1973 Dodge Dart 4-door that was in an estate, and they were auctioning it off, and he bought it for $5. It didn't run or anything, but I think that's kind of what you have. But in Vegas, the condition of the cars out there, all the rubber seals are usually destroyed. The paint's usually faded, maybe even gone from getting sandblasted or whatever from the desert. But the car has zero rust. Correct me if I'm wrong. That is my experience. I've been to Vegas a few times. You know, you pay attention to the cars that are out there, and you say, man, there's a 30-year-old car you see driving around. It looks faded, but like new. Nothing like you see out here. Mexican Spec, if you ever came to Western New York and saw the cars that are 20 years old that look like they came off the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, you'd be like, wow, that's horrible. So that's what we deal with here. Dale probably sees some of that too. Definitely Jennifer. Mexican Specs, I have always been addicted. I think once you get it in your blood, Max, once you have the cars in your blood, you always have to have more, right? I've had over 100 vehicles that I've owned through my life, at least. I used to have a spreadsheet, and I kept track of where I got them, when I sold them, what happened to them, and I haven't updated that in well over a decade, probably 15 years. So I lost count of how many cars that I physically owned. My wife used to laugh, well, not laugh, she'd get mad at me because my kids were supposed to be in bed for school the next morning, and my son would be up glued to his window in his bedroom. And my wife would come in his room, why aren't you in bed? I'm waiting for the tow truck. She's like, what tow truck? Well, the tow truck that's delivering Dad's new car. So that is, you know, now it's kind of funny, but when my kids are young and they're supposed to get sleep, my son's waiting up for the tow truck because he knew when the tow truck came, he would come outside, and I know the tow operators, and they, you know, as a little kid, you know, like to play with levers. He'd like, oh, here, push this down lever. So, you know, unwinds the cable and lets the car off the bed or whatever. That's, kids like that kind of stuff. So hopefully he remembers that when he gets older, right? So Jennifer has the same experience in Michigan that we have in Western New York. Winter, it's the salt that rusts the vehicles. So they use salt on the roads in this climate because obviously driving on ice is not safe. They salt, and they use calcium chloride. It's a salt. It basically makes the salt more effective at lower temperature, lets the ice melt at a lower temperature than straight rock salt. But the downfall is that gets in the seams of your car and it corrodes the car from the inside out, essentially. So that's something that we have to deal with here in Buffalo. Obviously in Michigan, that's the same thing. Cars 1982, 83 were garbage and boring. Next says cars from 1982, 83 were boring. I agree with that. My neighbor, two doors down, he's got an 83. I want to say it's an 83 Camaro with the Crossfire engine. So that's what that 1984 Corvette that I bought for $800. Had Crossfire. Basically, it was a 350 that had throttle body injection, but the way they split up the throttle body injection, one injector fed 4 cylinders, the other injector fed the other 4 cylinders with long runners, and it was kind of not very efficient setup. As fuel injection came to be more and more mainstream, they went to multi-port fuel injection. They got a lot more power out of them. So that 84 Corvette, which was Motor Trend's car of the year, and I joke with my coworkers about that I own 1984 Motor Trend's car of the year. The car was very rough. It was in rough condition. It had a rod knock in the engine. It was the first LS swap I did. That's one of my best videos on the channel in terms of viewership. And I thought the quality was horrible of that video. Before I reinvented this channel, and it's a long story, I had like 50,000 views on it. Basically, I did an LS swap, or an LS style engine swap. I took the garden variety of LS engines, bought it locally. The guy who was parting out a 2000 Tahoe, I believe it was. So it had a 5.3 liter LS style engine, iron block. And I put that into the 1984 Corvette. It increased the horsepower of that vehicle from the factory by at least 50%. I was limited by the rear differential. So that's why, putting in an LS, real LS, like an LS3 or any one of the LS series that would come in a Camaro or a Corvette, would be too much for the differential, and that car was not worth that kind of engine. But I thought a 50% increase in power, it woke the car up amazingly. And you know that every time you turn the key that it was going to start, run. The engine's probably still running. That was years ago that they did that. Yes, stock 5.3 is about 300 horse. I sent the engine ECU out. It was a stock engine ECU from that 2000 Tahoe. Sent it out on eBay to a tuner. They tuned all the things that I needed into the engine computer. Basically, they eliminate the anti-theft system that the truck came with originally. That doesn't work with the 84 Corvette. They tune out the rear oxygen sensors because you don't need the emissions part of the oxygen sensors in line for it to function. And they put in a fuel map for all of those items, some other additions, and sent it back to me. It was pretty much plug and play after that. I connected the ignition and some of the other power wires to the fuse block that engine ECU needed to power up, to run, and it ran great. Sounded great. I didn't do anything to the engine. This guy's taking those engines straight stock, adding 2 eBay turbochargers to it. They're getting 500-600 horsepower right out of the gate, reliable turnkey. And if you grenade that, you go to the local U-pull part and get another engine for it. So it's why the LS swap is so popular. I know it's overdone. They LS swap everything, and people don't like to hear it, but Mexican Spec may back me up on this. The small block Chevrolet, back when I was growing up, still growing up, I'm just a 12-year-old. That's my wife's oldest kid. Chevy small block was the go-to for engine swaps back then, back in the 80s, before that even. You would see a Ford Mustang with a Chevy 350 in it. Of course, all the Ford guys would get mad, but if you wanted to make reliable horsepower cheap, that was the go-to, because if you took a Ford 351 and a Chevy 350 and you put them right next to each other, to get the same horsepower on the Ford, typically with aftermarket parts, you'd have to spend twice the amount of money, at least. And with a Chevy engine, in general, you could get a bigger variety of options, intake manifolds, cams. It was just a very large selection. It's why I really wanted to, I want to complete the video on the inline six-cylinder that Chevy made. Originally designed as the Blue Flame, I think that was the name of it. On paper, it was designed in 1927. That engine was in production until 2002. Toyotas produced in South America. Quite the amazing story, in my opinion. They used them in boats. They used them for all kinds of applications, including gen sets, like generators. Toyota used that engine, the inline six-cylinder in the Toyota, from 1947 and newer. Not any of the performance stuff of their own inline sixes with the overhead cams and all that. That's Toyota's own. But after World War II, when Toyota was basically in its infancy, they needed a reliable engine that would power their products that they were building in Japan. And I believe they worked out a licensing agreement with GM. I can't find anything official anywhere. I just found bits and pieces, but my friend bought a Toyota Land Cruiser in Central America. He had a cabin or something that he owned. I don't remember all the details, but I know he drove it through Mexico all the way back to Western New York. And just like the stuff that Mexican Spec has, it was rust-free. It was beautiful until he drove it in this area. But he's like, you want to put an engine in my Toyota Land Cruiser? I'm like, I hardly work on Toyotas. I'm not really familiar. I kind of really didn't want the job. He's like, at the time I had a 51 Chevrolet pickup truck. He's like, it's the same engine that your 51 Chevy has. I'm like, somebody put a Chevy engine in a Toyota Land Cruiser? He's like, no, it came with it from the factory. And he said that the engine is the same, except it's tapped in metric, which I don't even know what, I never really compared what thread pitch was in it, but it made sense when I saw it. I'm like, it looked identical. So this is a 96 Toyota Land Cruiser. It had essentially the exact same engine design. Obviously, the displacement was different. It had fuel injection. It had emissions. But if you looked at the general look of it, where the side covers for the valve adjustments were everything about it, I don't know how much of it was like cross component. I don't know if you could put the cylinder head from a 51 Chevy on a 96 Toyota Land Cruiser, but it all had the basic same look. So it was very familiar. And I did swap the engine for him. That is a separate topic. So getting back to chat, do have the regulars in chat. I was hoping to get more people in the stream that we had last week. Last week we had 7,700 people. I was quite amazed with that. And I was trying to up the game. I was kind of inspired by that. So this is why I'm using the StreamYard software that I have been using tonight. I apologize for my lack of knowledge in all the features. Some of the features that it has are quite amazing. Yeah, 7,700 people. Crazy, Max. It was that many. not all at one time. Not all at one time. It was average. I thought the average was 136 people watching, and their average watch time was 20 minutes. So you guys had stayed the entire live stream. Obviously, that helps your average out a lot. But even Lily and I were discussing that. It was really, I was impressed. I didn't even look at what our numbers are tonight. Although I feel just based on the chat flow, it's just our regulars that are here that we may not have that kind of turnout tonight, which is fine because we're amongst close friends. If you remember last week, we had a lot of, I would say, solicitation, people like spam messaging, things like that. I didn't see that particularly today, but so I did want to go over two things actually. And the one I was researching, so it was brought up to me on the older vehicles that require lead additive or that had leaded gas. So you had leaded gas. When I was growing up, I remember when leaded gas went away, and the cars that showed unleaded, they ran on unleaded gas versus cars that ran on leaded gas. The difference was the valve seats in the cylinder head. The actual seat where it's machined with 3-angle valve job, the seat is hardened in an unleaded engine versus not hardened in, let's say, the 1937 engine that Oldsmobile that they have on the stand. Which I don't know if you can harden metal by adding heat and cooling it in certain ways. We had hardening compound that we used in machine and tool. I remember we got it red hot, and it was like carbon-based powder that you put on it, and it cooled down, and that made the metal hard. I don't know if you could use a technique like that to like case hardening the seats of an old engine, or if you have to just, yes, you do risk warping the metal or cracking the metal. You definitely, there is a risk when you take something that's cast iron and you heat it up red hot like you have to. I got some, when I heated up the block on the Rambler, the embossment, I see some stress cracks in it where the stud broke off in the engine block. I think that the heat made those stress cracks. I don't think it's going to affect the engine at all. It definitely doesn't affect the threads or anything. It just, yes, it's definitely a risk. Remember that cylinder heads, you could have the valve ports machined out and hardened seats pressed in replacement of the softer metal, soft metal, unhardened metal of an engine like the 1937 Olds that I have, that you could have pressed in there so you have hardened valve seats, you could run unleaded fuel, pump gas without any issues. The interim fix for vehicles that ran leaded gas, when unleaded gas is the only thing you can get, was an additive that was a lead substitute. I haven't seen lead substitute in a long time. The question that was posed to me was, is it even legal to get anymore? I actually posed this question to Dale, maybe Mex knows. Is the lead additive even available anymore? And if so, especially states like California and New York, I haven't seen it on the shelves in forever. I don't know that it contained lead. I don't believe it did. What's the substitute? What the lead was there as a cushion between the soft metal valve seat and the valves. Now, both components are hardened, and the impact of such doesn't cause the pitting or metal transfer like the softer metals did back then. So the fix was to add lead to the fuel, or maybe it always had lead in it to stop that metal transfer. So I don't know why it took so long in terms of technology to make that mainstream, because obviously breathing lead isn't very healthy, right? So exhaust gas, that particulate must have contained some fraction of lead, which wouldn't be good to ingest in any which way. You did have to add lead to the gas, but I haven't looked at all. This question was just posed to me a day or so ago, and I did not get out to the parts store or look for it very hard. And Dale, you used to run lead substitute, right? So I did not, even with the Volvo that I got running, I did not use a lead substitute. I didn't drive it very far either. I think that the point of which the deterioration of the valve seats occurred when the engine got hot on a long run with heavy loads. That's when you would get the valve seats hot enough where the soft metal essentially would stick to the valve. As I understood it, I'm going off of a memory from years and years ago. $7.99 for 12 ounces of lead substitute. How does that treat an entire tank of fuel, Max? Okay. Question is, Dale, is that legal? So here, I want to post two comments because we're going in live chat having this discussion. Dale used to run in his car. Max says it's $7.99 for 12 ounces. Lead substitute, Dale said, is available. Just looked it up. Is it available like via Amazon, or is it something that I used to see it on the shelf all the time? I don't remember. It used to jump out at me anytime you were in the auto parts store. Now, granted, I don't go to the auto parts store as much as I used to because a lot of stuff I get off Amazon or eBay, especially because the brick and mortar places charge like twice as much as I can get it on Amazon. And Amazon, I can get it in a day. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm cheap. So, you know, Walmart listed and at AutoZone. So Max sees it at AutoZone. It treats up to 20 gallons. All right. So that I will have to. Next week, I'm going to bring that topic up again. I'm going to do my research, and I'm going to go to the auto parts store and see if I can buy lead substitute. Specifically, I'll get it for the 1937 Oldsmobile engine, so I can put lead substitute in the fuel that I'm going to try to run it on. The problem, so the starter question came up earlier, Max, about the Oldsmobile. So the Oldsmobile engine in 1937, the starter and the flywheel were contained and part of the transmission bell housing. It's not as it is today, where you have the back of the block cast and the bolt pattern for the transmission is such. It's like a smaller bolt pattern where the transmission bell housing bolts onto the back of the engine, which opens up big enough for a flywheel to fit. Like between the bolt holes on the back of the Oldsmobile engine, I should have a picture. I shouldn't show it. It's probably no wider than 12 inches in any given cross point across any of the bolts on the back of the transmission. David said, hey, David, welcome to the channel. Put your comment up there. So he adds the lead substitute to a gallon every time he fills up. Increase your mileage by 18%. Interesting. I agree, Max. That's why some of the comments I've been getting on the 37 Oldsmobile engine, we're not sending man to the moon with it. It's not going into, let's say, a parade. Let's just say a parade vehicle. That's probably the best that I would describe the car that its potential home is for, is essentially a parade vehicle. It's something that's going to be driven so infrequently that the maintenance is going to come on the getting it running again to take it out for the parade. Because that's my friend's uncle is 83 years old and hasn't driven the car since he was in college in 1962. So 62 years the car has sat waiting for an engine. So Becca listed this engine from her dad's car, and I acquired it from her. Get it home, figure out it freely rotates, but doesn't have compression on 3 cylinders. Figure out that valves are hanging up. I already had it on the stand. It's a flathead. It's way easier to pull the head off of that engine than the 59 Rambler. I want to get into the 59 Rambler for a second because I had some comments on that I was a little frustrated with, but at any rate, the head came off, saw the valves are hanging up. There was rust around the valves. One cylinder had some lightly shading of rust. I used Rust-Oleum rust dissolver to clean all the rust out of that cylinder. It actually worked amazing. If you saw that short video when I use that on it, it looks nicer than all the other cylinders now. I think it makes enough compression. I couldn't spin the engine fast enough to really see the compression that I'm getting, but they were pretty much even across all 6 cylinders. So I don't think there's enough leakage past the piston rings or the valves to stop it from running. The question is, how am I going to get it started without a starter? My friend Mark suggested that I try the rope starting trick. And this sounded crazy to me, but I think it would be an awesome video, and hopefully you agree. He saw a video where he's trying to find it because I'm like, I got to see it. Somebody had an inline 6 engine, low compression like that, flathead. They took the pulley for the crank and they wrapped a rope around it. Now, I thought about this on the back side that I'll get to that, but they took a rope, wrapped it around the crank pulley, and on the ground, they pulled the rope fast enough for the engine to start. I think if you can get it to rotate past 3 or 4 cylinders and you get 2 of them to hit, that would be enough to get it started. What do you guys think? It would be a crazy thing to try. I like it. Read it again, Jay. Uh-oh. What am I reading again? Yeah, the 1936 Oldsmobile is not going to be driven enough to even worry about. So, Dale, you have an 8N with a hand crank starter, and you get a few cylinders to hit, and that's all you need. Obviously, the backfire, I was always told with hand cranking, and there's a certain way to hold it so your thumb's not there, because if it kicks back, you can lose a thumb. I almost lost my finger, the end of my finger yesterday. I don't know if you can see this. I can't. So if you compare my ring finger on both hands, this one's like twice the size. Yesterday, while attempting to disassemble a caliper, I was using shop air, which I've done this a bunch of times, but this one was sticking. So I grabbed more air, and it had a rubber nozzle, and I grabbed more air. Well, the thing finally released, and it came out like a cannon, and it caught my finger. It sounded like a gunshot going off. The piston shot out of there so hard and fast. It pinched my finger against the other side of the caliper. And let's just say there was a few word combinations there that were not so nice. And my friend who watched the whole thing is like, were your fingers in the way? I'm like, well, I didn't plan on it going this way, but my finger could have looked like a, indented shape with broken bones. I think we're all good. Max says disc brakes are evil. I tried an impact on a bolt. My impact gun wouldn't do it. The engine turns over so smooth. Without the head on it, it was like with the breaker bar, it was like one finger, and that thing just rotated over so smoothly, so smoothly. I got the head on it with all the valves open and closing. It's got some oomph, but I don't know how many RPM, a push with a breaker bar is. It's probably like 1 RPM, 2 RPM max. It just, it's getting the compression gauge to read. And we were all in like the 60 mark, 60 PSI. You need at least 90 to fire, but I'm just, 12-inch stroke, and the socket, the angle I was at kept coming off the crank pulley. So that was not fun. I did try the voltage to the generator. It sounded like I was going to start burning some things out. Somebody commented who was familiar with those generators, which I did want to talk about today. The generator only produces like so many. It wasn't a lot of horsepower. So although it did rotate the engine, I got the impression that I was going to burn out the field, so I stopped that. So Max says, are there any old guys near? I thought I was pretty old. Ask them how they did it back in the day. I will definitely pose that question. Back up. I have an idea for getting it started, and I'm going to tell you this after I show Max other comment. Okay, hear me out. Back up your modern car and jack it up, wheel drive, use the belt around the tire if you crank it. I agree with that too. That is a good way to do it. I was going to use a modified version of that idea, and here's how. So my friend I help out at his shop, he's got 1 million small engines behind the shop, and he started out as a kid doing small engine repair. He still does it with his automotive shop for his customers. They bring snow blowers and whatnot. He's got a small engine with a clutch, and I thought like a piggyback engine to use the belt around the crank pulley and that one-way clutch. So use the small engine to start the big engine. So that's how I thought of, if the rope trick doesn't work, I was going to attempt to start the engine on the stand. I was going to take the piggyback engine with that one-way clutch, so that obviously once the engine overtakes the small engine, and I was going to use like a long bar as a throw. So basically get that engine going, and the pulley is spinning. Then I'll take the long bar and engage the big engine with it. You're going to get a lot of belt slip at first, but once it gets going, yeah, pony motor. Exactly, Dale. That's essentially the idea I had. Raise my life insurance coverage. Why? That's just for the heck of it. I figured my wife already had my life insurance rates at max just in case, right? Because all these silly ideas. So if you notice the background, behind me is a green screen. I don't know if I can change it to just a green screen. You should see the amazing lighting setup that I have. I bought LEDs, LED lighting. obviously the reflection in my glasses for the live stream, it bothers me. I hope it doesn't bother you, but I can't read if I don't have them on, or I can't see good enough. So I'm going back in my memory from when I was in grade school. We took a tour of a studio locally, and we basically learned how they pan cameras, they did lighting, and I'm using a modified version of that. I have some white towels hanging. I have my brand new LED lighting shining on those tiles or towels so that I have diffused lighting instead of buying some big fancy diffused lighting and setting up a proper studio. We kind of got the budget studio going here, but with this setup, I'm able to do things that I wanted to do to try to keep this as interesting as possible. All right. So I had to remove some weird comment from somebody. At any rate. Thanks, Dale. So the lighting is good. I have the Lamborghini background. I have to go into a different spot, and when I do to change the background, I think I pretty much have to stick with this background for the entire stream. There are some things that I can change in the layout to make it look better, I think, but that's pretty much the setup that I can keep for the entire live stream. I'd like to get to the point where I can have multiple cameras to change it up. A lot of videos that I see when they do live, they can change from camera A to camera B just to change the look of things. They have some standardized backdrop scenes that you can put in there. Actually, I can get into the settings like that, the virtual background. So this is the standard background that they have bricks. So I have green screen behind me. We're moved up into the 2000s with the green screen technology. Or I can be, in a nice office, or I can put any picture I want up. In the beginning of the week when I first tried it, I had the Corvette that I was talking about earlier. That's a $97 Rust-Oleum paint job. 2X base and automotive urethane clear. I think it turned out amazing. You be the judge. For the Southern California theme, this is when I went to Jaguar Land Rover's Electrify the Pace. Those were the cars we were driving on the 405 in Irvine, California, where the OJ chase took place when I was in high school, way back in the 90s. Right there. It was fun to drive on that highway. Thank God it wasn't in rush hour. The traffic in California, crazy. There's another Lamborghini. I like Lamborghinis. Sorry, I do. Can't afford a real one, so I'm making one of my own. And that's the one that I had for the live stream today. So there's some other fun things with this software to hopefully keep the interactive stuff going. And when like Dale sent me some pictures, Jennifer did too. I can put them on the screen behind me. Hopefully all of you can see it just fine. And we can talk about different things. So I keep everyone included, and you guys, we can talk about different topics. So Dale, Scranton is the closest city to you. So I'm a little bit familiar with Scranton, especially who remembers the song 30,000 Pounds of Bananas? That was the same guy that's saying Cats in the Cradle. I have a CD. I can picture it. I just can't remember his name. We're talking about pictures in picture day. You did with your kid, Jennifer. What are you able to change the pictures? You got a picture on green screen, you can change the background? Is that they do all these things that are kind of clever nowadays? It's not Cat Stevens, Max. It's his greatest stories. He had really long songs that they never played all of because I don't know if he was like hippie like, but Cats in the Cradle. That's, anyways, his song about 30,000 pounds of bananas is about a road that leads into Scranton, Pennsylvania that has a really high grade. There's another hill like that locally here in Western New York that had a similar situation where back in the day, they didn't have automatic parking brakes or spring brakes on trucks. So modern day trucks have, if you lose air pressure, so the air brakes, it works off air pressure. If you lose your air pressure, back in the day, you lost all your brakes. Similar to like if you blew a brake line on an older vehicle, like that 66 Chevy I was working on this week, it had a one-cylinder master cylinder. You lose one brake line. If you blow a brake line or a wheel cylinder leaks or whatever, you have no brakes. You only have the parking brake. Or back in the day, we used to call it the emergency brake. So in the 60s, 50s, 40s, whatever, if a truck lost the air pressure because the compressor went out, they blew an airline, whatever, they basically lost all their brakes. So you would have a loaded truck potentially on a hill coming downhill and it had no brakes. In the 70s, I believe it was like 75, they changed it. They changed the brake operation to have what it's commonly referred to as a piggyback brake chamber, spring brake chamber. There's a mechanical spring. When you start a big truck with air brakes or a bus or whatever, you start it up, build air pressure, and then you release the parking brake. That applies air to the parking brakes, basically overcomes the mechanical spring of the parking brake system. So that in the event you lose air pressure, i.e. your air compressor fails, you lose a brake hose, when you lose all the air pressure, that spring applies the brakes again. That's why on the road, you may see at times, now it could be because they panic stop, but most trucks have ABS now, so you don't see it too often, but you'll see, let's say, a trailer lose air pressure on a tractor trailer, and the trailer brakes will lock up. And then you'll see the, black marks from the tire skidding to the driver pulling off the road, and the black marks stop because the spring brakes come on. In the 60s, the song about 30,000 pounds of bananas, truck driver, which I knew Joe Bolus. I used to talk to quite often. He had Mack trucks out of Scranton, Pennsylvania. You see them on the road. I see him on the road constantly here in Western New York. So he's from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Joe Bolus trucking all the way up in this area too. He remembers when that trucking accident happened. He's an older gent, and he remembers when that story came to be. Guy driving 30,000 pounds of bananas, essentially lost his brakes. He rode down the hill with the horn blaring and him, leaning on the side of the truck. He ended up losing his life. But there's a road or a hill in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where trucks are not allowed on anymore, similar to a road around here in Western New York on 20A near Letchworth State Park. A loaded fuel tanker truck lost its brakes. People died, house burned down. It's kind of a pretty interesting story. The fuel that was in the tanker ended up going into the storm sewers, and that exploded and lit on fire. So it was a mess. And they don't allow people to go on that hill anymore because they don't want anyone losing their brakes in the truck and having the same fate. If you can give me just a few seconds, I do want to look up who sang that song, 30,000 Pounds of Bananas. Because, all right, Harry Chapin. That's who sang the song. If you ever heard of him, Cats in the Cradle, I think, is his biggest hit. The 30,000 Pounds of Bananas, as he tells in the story of that song, he heard about going down the hill that truck driver lost his life in, coming into Scranton, Pennsylvania. Oh, you already posted it in chat. Well, see, I was too busy looking it up. Sorry. Hey, Yukon's here. Came to visit my live chat. I don't know how she got downstairs, but she's here. That's our one house cat. My daughter just got a kitten, and who is a ball of fire, and giving Yukon a run for her money. But yes, Harry Chapin. Michelle had it. Michelle, that you're in chat, where was your honeymoon? Was that Puerto Vallarta? If you are listening and hear that, because that's where Lillian's at, I think. So, yeah, Max, today the default of the brakes is activated. That is correct. So, we used to get trucks towed in on the regular, and the tow truck, a lot of times they would, so the spring brake chambers would mechanically activate the brakes. Parking brakes with no air in the truck. So if the truck is sitting, it lets out all the air. The parking brakes are on. Puerto Vallarta, that's where Lillian is right now. I put her on the map in Puerto Vallarta. So I thought that was right. When the parking brakes are on and the truck doesn't have any air and there's no way to air up the system, they have bolts that go into the brake chambers that the tow operator puts in the brake chamber, and basically they're like jacking bolts. It screws the bolts in, and it mechanically pulls against the springs to take the brakes off so they can tow it in to the shop. And that's how, but you're talking heavy wreckers that also have heavy axles that can tow and stop a combination tractor trailer. But the thing is, when they tow them in, they ask for either bolts in replacement of the ones that they used to take them out, or you have to unwind the spring chamber bolts so that the parking brakes work as they should. It's illegal to drive a truck on the road with those bolts installed for obvious reasons, because if you lose your air pressure, the truck has no means of stopping. So with the car, with juice brakes, as we call them, hydraulic brakes, they have brake fluid. If you lose your brakes, back in the day, you would use your emergency brake. So India versus Pakistan, what are your thoughts? I don't know if we're talking, hopefully we're talking sports. We don't talk politics here. We're just having fun with cars. So we stay out of the whole politics realm. We're talking, yeah, see, you guys must be talking soccer, what everyone else in the world calls football, but American football is what we, okay, in the car industry. Okay, I appreciate that. All right, so let's put this up. If this is true, Rolling Stone ASAP India versus Pakistan, what are your thoughts? I'm trying to, so the parent company, so Geely, but the parent company of Land Rover Jaguar is now the Indian-based company, which is a pretty huge manufacturer. So I'd have to say that India would be win out over anything that I don't have any experience. We don't see in the West anything from Pakistan here, at least on my side. David says, hi, folks. Tata, yes, you're right. Absolutely. Tata Motors. Oh, Tata Motors is the parent company of Jaguar Land Rover. And Geely, I believe, is a Chinese company. They bought the rights to Volvo, or the parent company now of Volvo. Unfortunately, Volvo went to the all-electric, line. I think they have since replaced their CEO as their sales have tumbled, and that's affected their overall world sales. I'm not against electric vehicles. If you've ever driven one, they, especially anything hot, like I got to drive the Porsche Taycan. It's all electric, all-wheel drive. It's absolutely insane. When they promoted that car when it first came out, they used the USS Independence in California. It's a museum. It's an aircraft carrier that's parked in a dock museum. They put that Panamera on the flight deck of the aircraft carrier, and they were able to go from 0 to 100 and stop again before they got to the end of the flight deck, actually with quite a bit from what I remember. They're just amazing accelerating vehicles, but they're not for everyone, especially in Western New York where we have cold winters. I would not want to be stuck in a snowstorm in a battery electric vehicle unless you had some other means of heat. So the battery will outlast, but the battery requires some energy to keep the batteries warm because the batteries are susceptible to the cold. So yeah, it would be very entertaining if they couldn't stop, Max. I took the first Taycan I got to drive for a PDI, which was pre-delivery inspection. Took it out. I didn't put it in the ludicrous mode or whatever the highest mode was, but I drove it, just as it was. It was a Turbo S model, which I found funny. I asked if they turbocharged the electrons going into the electric motors, but the Porsche, in their infinite wisdom, decided to keep the same trim levels as the trim levels of their 911, so that it was familiar to customers. So their electric vehicle had a Turbo S model, which is the car that I drove, although it was all electric. So there was no turbo. There was nothing really different other than trim on the car, maybe the suspension for the Turbo S model versus the other Taycans. Audi has, I forgot the Audi model that is similar or like the cousin to the Taycan. You guys might remember it. Yeah, turbo is a model, not a manner of induction. But turbo to Mex and I, at least when I was growing up, and I think he would agree, maybe Dale too, that the turbo was induction based. So if you had a Turbo S or a turbo car, it was because you had a engine that had a turbocharger feeding more air into it, which gave you more boost, like a supercharger. And that trim level, you could instantly tell if you had this model without a turbo or this model said turbo, that you were getting a more performance vehicle. So I guess that's what I did. Turbo K car. My grandmother had a Turbo K car up until she was 90. She had a Turbo LeBaron, not a convertible, but it was just a straight turbo car. My grandmother had a turbo LeBaron, which I got pulled over once in on my way back from my brother's house. And I was blowing the carbon off the pistons when I was a teenager, and didn't get a ticket. The sheriff was nice to me, but yeah, it was that was a thing. The K car that saved Chrysler. Now Chrysler and Stellantis is in a world of hurt. That could be a topic for next week's live stream. What do you think? We want to talk about our daily drivers or the world of automotive in general? Because there's a lot of stories out there right now between the different manufacturers. The one specifically that I know is in a lot of trouble right now is Stellantis, especially with the Jeep line. I don't know how they're doing in Mexico, but all across the board, it seems that I just keep getting in my feed headlines of Stellantis is in trouble. Michelle asked, remember? So I'll put that up there. Does everyone remember the Ford Granada? I thought my oldest brother, I thought had a Ford Granada too. Max, I thought you had one listed. I thought, did you or did you not? Am I not remembering properly that I thought you had a Ford Granada listed in a short recently? And the Volkswagen behind it. Yes, it is a Volkswagen. So Volkswagen, as a manufacturer, does own Lamborghini. I do like Lamborghinis, though. I'm sorry. All right. So Max said to Michelle that his family had a Monarch, which is that I don't remember a Monarch being a model. So we got to do some. Dale said that it was a good seller for Ford. Michelle had one in the 70s. David had the Mercury version. And Michelle hated the Granada. So Ford in general, I've had Fords. I grew up with GMs, kind of a GM guy mostly. I've had Fords. I worked at Ford, worked at a GM dealer before too. Anything modern, late model, it's a whole different way of building cars and thinking about how they're produced, thinking about how they get you from point A to point B. You're essentially driving a smartphone in such that everything you do is controlled by computer. The direct power to a component to do its thing isn't direct anymore. So, for example, I'll give you a few examples. I used one before. Your heating and air conditioning system. Even into the 2000s, I would say this is pretty accurate. You had power going to your heater controls. So you had power for the fan. That went to switch the fan at different speeds. That's what the knob did. And then you had power to go to the blend doors to change where the air is going, if it's going to defrost or at your face or at your feet. That's kind of how the heater controls worked. Now, the modern vehicles you have a smart switch component, and there's a module, and so there's like sometimes 3 or 4 steps from your input to get to it doing its thing. And in most cases, it's done with a touch screen as part of your radio. So essentially, and I think I mentioned this in one of the streams before, a modern car, so your heater controls, your radio is essentially a phone, and you're pressing a button to tell the smart component what you want it to do. So if you want the heat to come on, you press hotter, colder, and you can control your fan. The only problem with a smart component doing that work for you, the advantage is you can set your heat controls and start your car remotely, especially if you have a plug-in electric vehicle. You're plugged in, you can turn on the heat, pre-condition your car before you unplug it so that you're not using energy to get the temperature of the car inside up to temperature. It's great for that. That's the advantage, and that's why they build them this way. The disadvantage is if your radio fails, your touchscreen fails, it's not that you just don't have radio on your way to work. You don't have heat control. You don't have a lot of things. So when your smartphone computer system that controls your heater, your blower, your mirrors, the defrost fails, not only is your car almost undrivable, not saying that you couldn't drive it like that, but if you're in this type time of year in Western New York, if your heater goes out, your defrost doesn't work, you can't really drive your car. So conversely, if your radio failed in an older car, you could just go to Walmart per se, or anywhere that sells aftermarket radios, take your radio out and put another radio in. You didn't have to go to the manufacturer and buy a radio from them, although that was an option. You could overcome that with a lesser costly option. So essentially, if the heater goes out on your car, you essentially could, if your engine fails, you would say, oh, I just junked the car. Well, that's the same thing. If your radio stops working in a modern car, you may junk the car because a $4,000 computer screen that operates the radio and every other function of the interior convenience package fails, and your car is worth $3,000 and it costs $4,000 to replace the radio and program it to your car, because you can't just unbolt and bolt something else in. It's got to match, just like any computer component. They have to talk to each other, and if it's not programmed, they don't talk to each other, and the features still don't work. So even purchasing used radios, probably not very cost effective. You can, so I just get into that. So they'll be in junkyard too. So, but can you use a junkyard part? Yes, you can in most instances. I will walk very carefully in this when I'm speaking about the radio particular. So just like, remember the car radios of the past when they were getting stolen. Kids would steal radios in the 80s, especially. I remember that being an issue. Steal radios, they started putting in a radio code. So if you took a radio out of any car, and it was pretty much across the board for most manufacturers, you took a radio out, you had to have a code for the radio to program it in to unlock it, an unlock code. GMs did this especially. I know Volvo's did this. I know a lot of manufacturers use this technology, and it was essentially to stop thieves from breaking a window and stealing your radio to sell it. But you could go to the junkyard and buy a radio, and if you called, like GM, we had a phone number we called. So we had a GM radio, say it's a 1995 Oldsmobile something, Cutlass. You had a radio for it. We could call the number. It was a dealer hotline, and you could get that number. And I think for what the process was for customers coming in, let's say they went to the salvage yard and bought a radio to put in their car, they would bring a registration in, show us, hey, I own this 95 Oldsmobile. This radio went bad. I got another one, but it needs an unlock code. We'd press two buttons and hold it. It would give us the backup code. We'd call into a hotline, dial in that backup code, and some formula unwound it to the code you had to put in the radio, and then the junkyard part, you put that code in, and it would unlock the radio, and you could use it. Now, if you have a component, the VIN number is essentially etched into the processor of said component. And in order for you to use a used component, and we did this at a dealership level, we were having a problem with a car and we were talking to tech line, say radio function didn't work or something about the car didn't work. And engineers at the manufacturer were not really sure what's going on. It would say take a known good unit, which meant, okay, if we're, I'll just use an example. Let's say we're working on a Volvo S60 because I have one, right? Say Volvo S60, something stopped working, like a radio. Okay, take a known good component. So we'd pull in another Volvo S60. We'd take the radio out of it, plug it into the car having the problem, and then with the laptop, we would program the VIN number from the car we were putting into it in the radio, and then the car would recognize that the radio was a match to the car, and it would operate. If the radio was the problem, the radio would operate and communicate with the car. So that's what they'd have us do. So essentially the question was, if you can get a salvage yard part and use it in your car, sometimes, but it requires programming, especially in the SRS system. They don't want you using aftermarket airbags, or not aftermarket, but secondhand airbags or sensors because of the liability. So they want you to buy brand new stuff, and therein lies an issue. So, all right, David, I'm going to put this up here quick. David's 65 Galaxies was daylily yellow. This is my dream job out of all the jobs in the automotive world. I want to be the guy that names the colors of the car. But think about what kind of amazing job that would be. You're just sitting at a desk and here's a brand new Ford Explorer and here's the blue we have for it. Okay, we're going to call this, Blue River Rock. I don't know. You could just make up whatever. I mean, Acapulco Blue, Racing Yellow, whatever the name of the manufacturers. That's an awesome job to have, don't you think? That would be an amazing job. You go to work and I'm going to name colors of cars. What makes this brown or yellow or blue different from all the other manufacturers out there? Because someone sitting at a desk probably making $100,000 a year came up with a clever name for a blue metallic paint. Midnight Blue Metallic. That's actually the same or similar color that my wife's Nissan has. I love that. On 86 IROC Z Camaro had Midnight Blue Metallic, Midnight Blue Medium Metallic, I think it was. I love that color back in the day. And I love the color on a car. So Acapulco Blue. Yeah, that's a 60s Ford color, right? Plum Crazy Purple. That's it. Talking Mopar now. I can't think of any good GM ones. Who knows a good GM paint color that's unique that everyone will remember? Flame Red or something, they had some more generic colors, but they always had some flair to it to make it different. So the Acapulco Blue was a Ford color through and through, and it was used on a lot of the performance cars, I would say, of that era. So we're coming up on the 2-hour mark. I appreciate everyone that came to the 4th live stream, but 3rd week official live stream. Appreciate you guys all being here. I hope you join me again next week. I'm going to try to set up the live stream. GM Hugger Orange, yes. Hugger Orange, and it was similar to the small block GM engine orange that I remember. Nassau Blue, 65 Chevy. So, anyway, once again, thank you everyone for coming. especially thank Mexican Spec for being moderator here tonight. I'm going to get Jennifer as another mod. And yeah, it was, I have fun with these. Glad you showed up. I was hoping to get a few more. There's a few more people that I thought may come today, but if they're here, they didn't say anything. So I'll get some better. You know what I'm going to use, Max? I'm going to use one of your cars for my background next week. That's what I'm going to do. And maybe I'll change it up. Every week, maybe it'll be Dale's dad's car or something. I'll put it up behind me because I know this Volkswagen back here bothers you, even though you have a lot of Volkswagens for sale. And maybe I'll just change it to one of your Volkswagens next week. That would be fun. Swedish Gamer was here. Swedish Gamer was here again, and I appreciate that, but I didn't see you in chat. Swedish Gamer, why don't you email me a picture of your car, and we'll use your car on the stream next week. So if anyone doesn't have my email, right at the top, it's funwithcarsj@gmail.com. Email me a picture of your car. If you're watching this today, maybe you don't want to be part of the live chat. Maybe you want to be anonymous. That's fine. I appreciate you guys being here. Hopefully you had fun. Hopefully we talked about some interesting stuff to you. But next week, we're going to do it again. And the green beetle. All right. Yeah, for the jeans beetle. That's the one with the, correct me if I'm wrong, Max. I'm going off memory, and my memory isn't good, but it used to be. Is the blue jeans interior. So like denim interior. All right, so CB said, what do you think about the 91 to 96 Caprice? So we were just talking, this specific question came up on the 66 Chevy I was helping my buddy with this week at his shop. Put a tie rod end in it. There's a sleeve that goes between the tie rods that has reverse thread of each other. So when you wind them one way, it toes out, and wind it in the other way, it toes in. And we were asking, well, the parts store isn't going to have that. I'm like, I think they might. I said, yeah, when was the last time they had this style steering? I'm like, well, they ran it on the Caprices up into the 90s. So the Caprice, the Impala SS, which I think is the same chassis as the Caprice, I think they were a decent platform back in the day. The Caprice LTZ, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the police packaged one, had the OptiSpark engine that they used in the Corvette. LT, was it LT1? LT1 was another one of the platforms in that era. They were decent cars. It was soft, cushy ride. So I'm okay with the 91 to 96 Caprice. We don't see them around here too much anymore. Max, I do plan on being in the stream on tomorrow night with Tony. Max is a moderator on Uncle Tony's Garage on Sunday nights, and it used to be Wednesdays, but I think he switched to Thursdays now. That's a good show to see. He's another motorhead, gearhead like we are, I think, and a lot of fun in that stream as well. So if you've never been to an Uncle Tony's Garage live stream, come join us tomorrow night. Okay, so Dale's going to send me some pictures to share. Max has got a Volkswagen with the denim interior. You have what I think is amazing. You have what I would consider classic Beetles that are built in Mexico from the 1990s that are just amazing to me. I'm not a Beetle fan per se. I'm not a Volkswagen fan per se, but I do love the fact that they continued to build them in production in Mexico up until the 90s. So that's an amazing story in itself. We probably should do that one day for live stream is talk about the history of the Volkswagen Beetle, originally designed in the 30s, and in Mexico at least they built them up into the 94, maybe later. Okay, last Beetle was 2003, but in the States, Mex, they had Beetles in 03, I think, but they were a different chassis completely. It was two different cars. They called them the Beetle, but other than them being rounded and looking the same, it wasn't the same car as what you have on your channel listed for sale as a Mexican Beetle from the 90s. You say it goes up to 03. Okay, so the modern Beetle, they change it to a Golf. They had the Golf in the United States was its own separate model. But the Beetle and the Golf may share the same build platform, the underpinnings. The bodies might have been different. I'm not sure. I worked at VW only for about 6-7 months, and that's my extent of Volkswagen knowledge from doing the training, dealership level training. We had to learn the history, but all those specifics, I'm not going to say I'm nearly strong enough expert at. So in regards to the cars that Mexican Spec has for sale and presents on his channel, he can only export a 2000 model if it was built before the date of importation. So correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mex. The import rules in the United States, I don't think it's a Mexican export rule as much as it's an American import rule, right? So I know my son looks at all these wild, like Korean cars and stuff. That he's, I want to get one of these. And he's on the site all the time. Some weird model, weird to me model, that I never heard of, that you can import into the United States because it's over 25 years Julian date from its Julian date, meaning the date that it was built. I think that's how it goes. So if you had, per se, like a 2000 model year, if you had a 2000 model year, we'll say Volkswagen in this case, but it was built in, let's say, September of 1999, but it was a 2000 Volkswagen Beetle, you couldn't import that into the United States. If I'm correct on the details, Mex is the expert on that. He's imported a bunch of cars in the United States and has the references. And Mex, who was the YouTuber that purchased a vehicle from you and you guys featured on both your channels? If you're interested in that kind of thing, if there's a specific model that you would like to own, Mex has all that stuff for sale on his channel, and MexicanSpec.com, I believe, is your website. I should post a link, or maybe you can post a link next week. I'll even put it on the channel. Well worth taking a look into. Okay, so this is the answer to the question. So Mex has got a Dodge Ram Charger. I worked on a Ram Charger this week, 84, I think it was. I fought with that baby a little bit. But his 2000 Dodge Ram Charger was made in October of 1999, October 16th. So we're going down to the date. And now it can cross into the United States because it's after 25 years of being built. So you probably bought that before the 16th of October in anticipation of that date coming up, because now Mex can actually sell it and import it into the United States. I was always intimidated by the importation process, but I know like Mexican Spec has the experience with getting it into the United States. Conversely, because we're so close to the Canadian border, two different things. he has customers in Canada, we can, because we're so close to Ontario and the border into Ontario, you know, I'd be happy to help with the staging process for something like that. But conversely, getting a Canadian vehicle into the United States, I would be less worried now about importing it, because I think that would be awesome. I'd love to get like a 1995 Lada. That's a Russian car. Those things are kind of cool. If you watch Garage 54, he shows and highlights a lot of those different cars. Okay, so Mexico has tightened up, or Canada has tightened up exports. Is that only for classic cars, Max? There's one channel that's located in Ontario. As the crow flies, probably about 60 miles from here. I can pick up probably the same TV stations off the CN Tower that they do. Watch Hockey Night in Canada at the same time together. But I reached out to them. I thought we could have like a build off of sorts. They actually just picked up a 57 Chevy out there. I got that 59 Rambler. I thought we could do like a build off for an ultimate winter vehicle, but they're a little bit bigger than I am, and I think both the guys on there and one of the guys' wives that's on the channel, I think that the amount of time that they can put towards their channel, they have responded to me a couple times, but never directly to that challenge. I thought it would be cool for both our channels, and then maybe we could meet with the cars, you know, halfway point between here and there, because it's probably like a 3 to 4 hour drive from here. Even though there's 60 miles, there's a big Great Lake in between here and them, Lake Ontario. So we'd have to put it on a barge and paddle it across to get there faster. It's a separate topic. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the live stream for tonight. Once again, I thank everyone for coming. Thank you, Mexican Spec. And yeah, I'm going to shut up. So I'm going to post your comment just because it's so nice. Can you shut up? I'm going to shut up right now. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks, Mex, for moderating. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Dale, for being here. Michelle, Lillian stopping in. And yes, have a great night. Please come again next week, and we'll, if you have anything in terms of a topic or cars you want to share, Mex, you give me your the hottest car on your lot of cars to sell and import. We'll feature that next week. All right. Have a great week, everyone. Hope you all have a good week. And Mex, I'll catch you tomorrow. Good night.